Good morning, anyone who chooses to tune in, or good afternoon or evening, depending on when you watch this. I opted to do some streaming this morning because when I was streaming yesterday afternoon, the lighting wasn't the best. Even with my drawing light and my curtains pulled, there was still so much Arizona sun that it was kind of coming through. So this is the piece we started yesterday. We did all the inking with the brown ink on it, and we started on the colors, and I'm going to try to finish that up. And if we have time, maybe do some other concepts as well. And I have a few things I want to add to this piece. One of them I really want to do more stuff in the background on it. And I tend to do these sort of abstract patterns with my backgrounds, but I really want to do some sort of swirls and magical stuff going on kind of in the background. And then I don't know if I'm going to do the whole background or just a little bit up near the top here, and I don't know if we'll get anybody tuning in as much this morning, but I'm trying to zoom this in. There we go. I'm trying to kind of vary when I stream and kind of what I'm streaming. So folks in different time zones and who are awake at different times of day or have work or other things can still kind of tune in. So I feel like it might be pretty quiet, but then at least there will be a recording of this for everybody to watch later. The color I'm using here is called Cerulean Blue. It's one of the colors I use most often. It's kind of a blue-green. And I'm just creating some background stuff. Probably when I put this picture into the book, I may not keep all the swirls, but compositionally for a piece to hang on your wall, I think it's kind of cool to have some neat background stuff. And sometimes I do really detailed backgrounds, but because the foreground is kind of a lot on this, there's a lot of like teapots and stuff, teapots, teacups, and everything. I just want to do just a little bit back here with a pretty light color. And I mentioned this on the Kitsune Fox piece I was doing that had these. I kind of like doing these sort of random swirls because it gives a little bit of movement to a picture that might be more still otherwise. I don't know if you call them magic swirls or air currents or what, but I think they look kind of cool. And it's around 10 o'clock, a little after that here in Arizona, so depending on where other folks are, I don't know if we'll get anybody tuning in this early, but the lighting is really good for finishing this piece. And I want to do, if I have time, a couple of concept sketches, maybe some inking on them for some of the smaller pieces I have to do this month. I think it's reached where I'm doing 8 little paintings a month. And then June's going to be crazy because the way my Patreon works, there's a number of higher subscription levels where you get a painting this size and kind of this level of detail every 3 months. So you get 4 a year. And the way it worked out when I had a lot of people sign up is that they kind of grouped together. So I try to get a head start. Even I've only got one large painting due for a subscriber this coming month. It'll be due early May. So I've asked her what she wants, and if she gets back to me in the next couple weeks, awesome. Otherwise, I just kind of pick a creature. but but come early June, there's going to be like 5 or 6 paintings this size due. So I try to get started on those kind of in May. We're going to try to get a jump start on some extra large ones. So there's going to be a lot of these. I think it just looks cool to do that. Oh, we got a couple of people watching. I'm surprised there's anybody up. But again, you guys might be in a very different time zone than me. Good morning. And if you missed yesterday, we did a stream that I just had this sketched, and I showed inking it with brown ink, which I actually did with a brush, and it's waterproof brown ink. And then we started on some of the colors, but I want to do more on this teapot, and I have some cups down here that need color. The dragons need more detail. So I'm basically working on a lot of the like finer details and things that really bring a painting to life. And it kind of became a little bit of a signature of mine on some of my bigger pieces to do these sort of weird patterns that started with rune dragons when I was doing a lot of art that was going to end up on an oracle deck. It sort of happened. And I've been pondering if we could do an oracle deck with a lot of the art for this book as well. Would it be cool to do like a tea and coffee oracle or a beverage oracle and somehow figure out the meanings for the drinks or the creatures that like the drinks? I've been thinking about that. Good morning. It's cool to see people coming in and out, kind of checking out what I'm doing. I'm hoping we occasionally get people who are just sort of browsing Twitch as well, versus people who come in from my website or emails or Patreon, because I try to reach more people. I don't know. I was looking at people who get like 3,000 people watching them, though. That's a little too much. I don't know that I'd want that many. We'd have to get moderators in here, and it would be hard for me to keep up with everything. But right now, I kind of like, I'd like to get like more people, but it doesn't have to be too many more. I kind of like keeping things small. I do that with my Kickstarters. So that corner is pretty good. And I'm not going to do the whole piece as detailed with those swirls. I'm doing them first because they're at the upper part. So I'm going to rotate it to do this corner. Because I think it's a little bit easier to do the top this way. And then I'll work on some of the lower part. I was originally kind of painting this a little more seriously yesterday, and then partway in we decided it needed to be a lot more whimsical, so I add a lot of stripes to the teapot, but I still feel like parts of the teapot might be too bland, so I might do more on those. I feel like the more paintings I've done with swirly things, the better I've gotten at freehanding them. It used to take me a lot more work to do this, and now it's a bit easier. There we go. And I figured I'd just do kind of a light blue back here because it won't be too distracting from the rest of the piece. To kind of complement some of the colors that I chose for the teapot and things and make them pop out. So this is definitely one of the stranger pieces I've done on the channel. I don't know. I see a lot of people streaming kind of more traditional subject matters, a lot of anime chicks and fine art stuff, and thought I would try to do something a little bit different. Hopefully not too different. And eventually I have to do the cover for this book, and I've been debating if I want to do that completely digitally or do a painting and then add the text and some lighting and things digitally. And my original concept for the cover was dragons coiled around a martini glass, but I'm a little worried that might be too specific to alcohol things when the book has some drinks that have alcohol, but a lot of the creatures in it are tea and coffee creatures. So it might be cool to do something kind of like with a teapot for the cover, or do something with a bunch of creatures. I'm trying to decide because I don't want it to be too busy. And of course, I have a back cover, or I can do a wraparound cover as well. So to think kind of on that. I think it would be cool to kind of play with the idea that I did in this piece where there's a stack of kind of mismatched teacups for the cover, but somehow make them different types of cups and glasses and things that you might have for drinks, or just feature a bunch of them on there. So I have to figure that out. I might have gotten carried away with the swirls in this corner, but I think it'll be okay. The cool thing about watercolor is if you do decide that you've too much, or that the edges are too sharp or something, you can just use water and kind of blend it if it ends up being an issue. But let's see how this looks now that it's not upside down. It's actually kind of cool. And I'm just going to bring them down a little bit over here, but they're not going to be as much lower down on the page. I really just wanted to do kind of the top. And I think our dragon's looking pretty good up there. We decided yesterday these guys should all be different colors, even though they're the same species. So when I write about them, I have to come up with either subspecies or why there's color variations. I was kind of liking the idea of them changing color when they're young and then getting sort of a fixed color when they get older. Partly because they're a little bit inspired by chameleons, because I gave them kind of really curly tails. I want them to be able to hang off the handles of teacups and things like that. There we go. So I want to make sure that a little bit of this carries through so it doesn't look disjointed that I've only got this at the top, but I'm not going to do as much lower down. It's just going to fade out a bit, and we'll see if I want to do something more with the bottom. But I'm much happier with the top now. And I have it zoomed in a bit. I'll zoom it out later to show the whole piece, but I wanted to kind of show a bit more working on the details. So I'm trying to decide, I guess probably try to finish up this top dragon first. So for that, I'm going to use some white ink. And I use waterproof white ink, so when it dries, it will not smudge. I already used a little bit yesterday, kind of on his eyes and stuff. But I want to add some more highlights kind of to his back here. And I usually use acrylic-based white inks, because the problem is if you use white watercolor, to get it kind of thin enough to paint with, you lose a lot of that bright white. So some people you use just white acrylic paint or white gouache, but I find those to be a little too thick. So I get white ink. And apparently when I'm painting and I'm talking, it's very relaxing because I'm only sort of half thinking about the talking, because I'm kind of in some sort of like Zen meditative thing when I'm painting. So we were joking that it was like painting ASMR, if you guys know what ASMR is. But hey, if it's relaxing, I think it's because my voice is a tiny bit scratchy because I've had allergies, though I did take stuff this morning for it. And I do have coffee here. And tip, if you are someone who drinks coffee, tea, or other beverages while you're painting, make sure they are very far away or on a different side from where your water jar is, because you do not want to dip into your coffee. I have very rarely done that, but I've had friends do that right after I warned them to make sure that it was nowhere near their paint water. I've had them like within 5 minutes dip their brush in their coffee and have to go get a fresh coffee. And I used to teach painting at a place that served coffee, so that would happen more frequently than not. I tell people if you've got drinking water or coffee, try to get the stuff with the lid so that you're not going for the wrong container, because you don't want to drink white ink or paint. Most of the paints now are pretty non-toxic. Some watercolors can be. You should always be aware of that if you've got pets around or kids, and not leaving tubes of paint where critters can chew them. That's always good too. So yeah, I'm just using white ink to kind of just bump up the details a little bit on this guy. I want him to stand out a little bit from the teapot, so it's amazing what a little white ink will do. And those are the sorts of details kind of left on this piece to do, except for the one teacup and saucers at the bottom that are not painted yet. But I want to do this first so I don't end up leaning on wet paint while working on it. I'm going to add a little bit in the way of highlights up here to the top of the teapot as well. It's really kind of up the discretion of the artist how much you need in highlights. If you know you're going to have big areas of white and you need to save them, you can use what's called masking fluid, which is something you paint on and then later peel off. It won't hurt your paper, and it'll keep the paint from getting where it is. But for the kind of painting I do, I find this a little easier to just add a little bit of white ink. And if it's standing out too much, you can just get a little bit of water on your brush and it'll blend in pretty nice. There we go. Oh, we actually have 5 people watching this morning. I didn't think anybody was going to be up. I always feel like I get people watching right when I'm at the end of a stream versus in the middle, so this is good. Like I said, if you guys missed the beginning of this painting, I was streaming that yesterday, and that video will still be up for a while. There we go. That just sort of brings things a bit more to life. And I was pondering if I needed to do some more patterns on the teapot, but because I did so much in the background, I think that would be too much, so. There we go. I have a feeling my boyfriend is lurkingly watching me paint from across the room because I gave him a thing for holding his phone so he could watch Twitch streams on it while he's gaming. So that's weird because he's in the same room as me, but that's okay. There we go. He's totally lurking. You're just trying to get my viewer count up.
Well, I'm watching both.
I'm just trying to make sure that the teapot here has just enough dimension and kind of life to it. Watercolor, and especially if you're adding ink on top, or I did brown ink to start with, I'm doing watercolor, I'm doing white ink. It's very much like a balance of having it get the feel that you want it to have in all of the layers of paint. So if you're an impatient person, this can be hard to begin with, but like I said, you kind of learn a bit of a relaxing, sort of meditative way of doing it. That looks better. He's watching multiple streams. Okay. And similarly, I'm going to use the white ink to add some highlights. And if you find your ink is too thick, you can thin it down too, just with some water. This newer type I got, I actually just have a jar of it I can dip into, which I really like. Um, I was using a kind before this that had like the eyedropper and you had to put it into something or prop the eyedropper somewhere while you were painting, which was kind of awkward. There we go. Just gonna add a few highlights. And if I find these are too bright, I can, after they dry, I can always add some paint over them. But I think we're gonna need some here. This sugar jar is gonna look too dark. And I mentioned this yesterday. This is entirely a mismatched collection of tea-related china, probably shoved in a cupboard somewhere these dragons have moved into. So the teacups don't match, the sugar pot, they're all different sets, which makes it a little easier because you're not having to match the designs when painting, but I also think it makes it more fun. I can do these crazy whimsical things. This is kind of how I stay sane. It's not even just with the things going on in the world today, but this is sort of how I stay sane on a regular basis. I started painting to deal with stress, and then it became my job. And sometimes I get stressed over my workload, but it's almost never about the actual painting. It's usually about like mailing things or other stuff. And I'm actually in the middle of a really big Kickstarter mailing, so I'm going to be going back to packaging books after I have done some painting. But I thought I would do it while we had really nice lighting. And I've shown a lot of kind of quicker paintings on here. So this is one of the ones that probably total time on this is going to be about 4 hours. There was about 20 minutes before I started the video yesterday. That was the sketching. And then we did right around 2 hours, or well, yes, yesterday just to do the inking and the basic painting. And then I'm expecting this to be about an hour or so to finish it up this morning. And then if I have time, I was going to show something completely different that's not a dragon. Since I'm doing so many little paintings, I'm going to kind of show some of the concepts I do for those. So right now I'm just trying to make the word sugar kind of stand out on the sugar jar a bit. A lot of this type of china, you might get kind of a 3D, almost sculpted word. So I was kind of trying to do something a little bit like that. And I'm not putting this white on too thick. I'm adding some water to it as I'm doing it, so it'll dry a little bit blended in. And like I said, if you find you need to blend it in more, you can just use just water like I'm doing now. And there we go. One sugar jar. This guy definitely needs some work, and this cup needs some work. And the other cup, so I'm going to work kind of on that stuff next in color, and then last I'll come in with some more white. And with this kind of blue background of swirls at the top, I want to do something else with this background down here. It's a little too brown. I put the brown ink on it. I want to add some of the blue kind of into that, and probably a little bit of, I'm going to use the color I always use for shadows, Moon Glow, which is a Daniel Smith brand color, which is awesome. It's kind of my go-to shadow color. I talk about the fact that I usually use paints that aren't very expensive, and the only a few colors, mainly two, Moon Glow and one of the golds that I use from Daniel Smith. But the thing is, the tubes are pretty big, so a tube might be anywhere from $12 to $18 just for one tube, but it's going to last me about 3 years of painting, so it's pretty cost effective. And the other paints I use, you can get an entire set of all the colors for about 30 bucks. So you do want to make sure you're using light, fast paints that won't fade in the sun, in case you are hanging this somewhere where there is sun. That's right. And I missed a tiny, tiny spot yesterday from the sugar bowl that has to show through under his chin here. So we'll get that. There we go. It's cool to see we got some people watching. I think it's neat. I get to kind of be a background thing for people if they have their own tasks to work on. I do the same thing with the radio or audiobooks or movies or TV, as long as it's not something I really have to focus on. Some stuff we watch has subtitles, or I really want to focus on the story and the characters, so I won't paint or draw or work on clerical stuff while I'm watching it. But other stuff, I can kind of just have on in the background while I am painting or working on stuff. Writing as well, I kind of can't have stuff on as much. I can listen to music depending on the type of music, but see, I'm just adding a little bit of color kind of into this background area here, so it has a little more life to it. I do like the brown because it makes it look kind of really antiqued, which I think is cool for a painting. But I want to get a little more sort of this purpley shadow stuff going on here. There we go. And I really want to make this little dragon we have sitting in the cup kind of pop out a bit more. And I could probably use some of my same shadow color for that right on top of his green to just darken up a couple of the spots here. The great thing about watercolors, you can kind of do large areas with lighter colors and then come back in. If you have white ink, you can always add some highlights if you forget to leave them or don't realize you need them early on. And you can come back in with these darker colors and a smaller brush and really give things a bit more life. That looks pretty good. I'm hoping you guys are able to see this fairly well. I always worry. I don't know if I need to bring the cameras in closer, but it looks pretty good. Try to keep the lighting. The lighting today is better as far as what the colors look like on the screen. So I don't know. Yesterday I was just getting the weirdest patterns from the sun and things, even though I had the curtains drawn and everything. It just happens. Use a little more green on him. He's a little too pale. So when I first started out, I definitely built colors really slowly and often did not do like a lot of contrast or things. And I've kind of learned how much color I'm getting on a brush and balance of all that stuff over time. So when you start out, it's probably going to be, you're either going to be too heavy-handed and use too much paint, or be too light and use too little paint and too much water. And it just takes practice to learn to get kind of the intensity and level of color that you want. There we go. He looks a lot better now. And on this cup, I'm going to pull just a little bit of ultramarine blue, which is one of the most classic colors. And actually, when I learned to paint, we did not use big sets of paint. I was learning with gouache, which is like watercolor, but it's not transparent. We had 3 colors, lemon yellow, ultramarine blue, and I want to say one of the rose colors. It was like a reddish color. Permanent rose, I think, was the other one that we used. And then we had black and white, and we mixed everything from those. And it was because it was a color and design class, so we were learning a lot about color mixing. But really, most paints are made from just 3 or 4 colors, and they're just different combinations of those. So you really can do a lot with very few colors. Our kitten is unhappy. Actually, that might be the older cat. I'm not sure which one that is. That sounds like the older cat. Yes, primary colors. Well, sort of primary colors, but in paint, it has to do also with the pigments in the paint and which ones have very pure pigments and like very few colors. Because like if you get a purple, obviously that's at least two pigments, but sometimes you'll get purples that have three pigments in them, and if you just mix too many, you end up with mud. So if you're not sure, you can actually always look at the side of a tube of paint. It'll tell you what's in it. Um, but ultramarine blue is kind of the purest of the blues. There we go. One happy little dragon in a mug. Or teacup, really. I tend to use mugs for my coffee dragons and then daintier teacups for my tea dragons, though actually people do drink tea out of dainty china as well. There we go. I'm trying to decide how I feel about this creamer that I did here yesterday, if that needs more color. So I kind of brightened everything else up. But I want to work a little more on the colors of some of these other cups first. So I know what color this cup down here is going to be, but I'm trying to figure out in my composition what I want to do with that middle cup. Because I think this one's going to be a green and gold cup and saucer. The saucer is actually going to match on that one. I could leave just a white cup, but since these are all colored so far, I think it's just going to look unfinished if I do that. So I'm debating if I want to make this green and gold or some other color and gold. I'm just going to add a little more color to our creamer over here. So I can go back in and put some highlights on it later. Kind of fun and amazing that we're able to have me stream and then have watch multiple streams at the same time. And our internet is so good these days that it can handle all that. Whereas even like 10 years ago, I feel like it cost a lot more to have good internet than it does now. But I guess it depends where you live as well. There we go. I'm going to put a lot more highlights on this, so it's going to be much lighter when it's done, and he needs some more highlights for sure, some more details. So we'll go ahead and do our little orangey dragon next. Since I didn't paint right next to him, it should be fine. You got to be careful that you don't paint next to paint that's already wet, or it starts to bleed together. But I'm just going to cut a little more kind of a orangey red color here. See if we can't make him pop out just a little more. I still want him to mostly be like a yellowy orange dragon, so I don't want to add too much of this. But add a little around the eye and just some of the points here with a little red. There we go. I think that looks a little better. Blend him in a little bit. Because I'm going to come in with the same white and do some highlights on him too. So I want his face just dark enough where that white will stand out nicely. And so far I have a lot of very sort of blue and purple china and pink kind of pastel stuff with these front ones. So these other two cups here are going to be a little bit different. And I'm just trying to decide exactly how I want to approach that. And how dark I want to go with some of these. So I'm thinking I'm actually going to make this a reddish cup. And when you get colors, you'll have like your pure red colors, which actually are usually almost like a pink. Like I was saying with like permanent rose or some of the really pink colors I have in here. I have one here called Opera that's really bright. But then you have colors like this where they've added some more yellow into it. This is, I believe, Vermilion. And you'll have things like Crimson, Vermilion, Carmine. So you really have to get to know, especially I think your reds when you paint. So you kind of know what you're doing. Otherwise, it can be a little weird. I have a sort of a strange plan for this cup, so we'll see if it'll work. But I'm just starting with the reds. And I leave areas like this where I'm doing a lot of red kind of towards the end of a picture because colors can always kind of smudge and bleed, but red is one of the worst for that. So I try to wait and do them near the end, but because I have pretty good outlines on here with the brown ink, it should kind of keep me from streaking or smudging too much as long as I don't use like a huge brush. I have two different ideas of ways I could take this mug, and I think I know what I want to do with it. So it's going to have to dry completely for that to work. I'm just making the red more intense, but just layering more of it on there and kind of using a slightly pinker red. I think this is Crimson. They label the colors all differently. Usually colors are pretty close if they have the same name between different brands of paint, but they can be different. So it's always worth kind of testing your paints out when you get new brands or new colors so that if you do want a very specific color or you're partway through a picture and you need to get more paint and you're trying to match it, that you know what the color is going to do. That looks way more orangey on there than it does in real life. But feeling my saturation is up a little high. Whoa, that's too up. Okay, it's fine. Somewhere in the middle. That's a little closer to what it looks like. Find a way that the camera will just show something totally different than what it looks like on paper, and then I have to try to adjust it. Okay, so while that's drying, I'm going to go back to a larger brush, go back to kind of my moon glow. I've been kind of using it to blend up into the spiral design at the top, and maybe do some more subtle spirals with like a darker color down here. So I don't want them to be as obvious as the ones at the top, but I still want to have some sort of pattern. And this should dry pretty light. It's going to blend in pretty well here. The nice thing is if you look at something like this and you decide it looks dumb, like I just did, you can just do this. And it will just blend in. I think we'll just keep the spirals to the top. Because I think that looks better, but I still want to get just a little bit of that same blue in here on the edges. Again, because I felt like it just looked too brown. So I'm just adding some kind of purple shadows and just a little bit of blue in here. And it may look like it's really bright blue, but once I work on this a little, it's going to blend in very nicely. And there's some artists who are really practiced with using just like one brush that's really big but has a tiny tip, and they can do pretty much every size of brush stroke from that. I'm not quite that good, but I've definitely gotten better over time as far as being able to do smaller areas with bigger brushes and finer lines with them. And so much of it depends on having good brushes as well, but I don't like to spend too much on them because I do paint with ink as well, and that's really hard on the brushes. So I actually kind of like having this a little more blue. And I always talk about how with watercolor, it's such a balance of control and then letting what are called happy accidents happen, where things come out a little better than you thought by just doing something weird. So I'm just introducing a little more of our cerulean blue that I used at the top for the spirals kind of into the background here. It looks pretty bright now, but it's going to dry really nicely and kind of blend all this together. That's the plan. That looks pretty good. So we're getting there. That red mug is, or red cup is dry. I have a little more work to do on the background, kind of around these areas. And I have this last cup here to finish up, which I was going to do some really crazy color with it, like green, but I actually think I'm just going to use another yellow. Maybe kind of just a different tone of yellow or gold, because I think that'll look neat. I would leave it in white, but again, because there's not a ton of white in the rest of the piece, and I want to be able to add highlights, and I'm going with more whimsical colors, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to change that up. The thing is, there's really no mistakes when it comes to doing your own pieces, because you're kind of in charge and you can play around and try different things. There's definitely pictures I look at that I did 10 years ago where I think I could do much better now. It's been such a learning experience. There we go. Like that's coming together pretty well. I'm going to actually zoom us back out a bit there so I can show kind of more of this as I'm working on it. I feel like my colors are a little more subtle than are coming across on the camera, but that's okay. I said it's really hard to show that. Like, that mug looks more red to me and looks more orange on the screen. I never know. It might be that my contrast is up too high. That's a little better. Try to find the happy medium that shows everything. And it did take me a while to figure out, because I do so much art, I wanted to scan it myself versus going to a place to have it scanned. So it took me a while to figure out kind of the best settings and methods for scanning it. And I mentioned recently I had to replace my scanner because it died after 10 years. So I had to do a lot of research as to which scanner to get, but pretty happy with the Canon one I got. It wasn't the most expensive. It was the best rated for scanning artwork. And a picture like this I'll actually scan in 2 pieces. And then I will use, you can either use the software that comes with the scanner, or you can use, I just use Photoshop, and it auto stitches them back together, which is really cool. I'm going to work some more on this mug here, which I think would be cool if it's kind of orange and yellow. Guess we'll see. We'll see how that works out. It's a little harder to see the color difference on the computer, but hopefully you guys are seeing it. I'm happy to have a couple people hanging out. We've been kind of bouncing around from 2 to 6 viewers and back, so I have found a lot of lurky people out there. But I also try to leave stuff up so people can replay it later. There we go. And I love the idea of these over-the-top whimsical cups. I'm actually going to do something cool on this red one that I did using white ink. I'm going to try to do something with that, so we'll see. We'll see if that'll work. And you actually can get really whimsical china. I've even painted my own sets with clockwork stuff or whimsical patterns, but there are a lot of people who actually like it enough that there's some brands out there, I think, that will sell you checkered teapots or weird striped teacups, and I think I probably like the zany ones a little more than the traditional, but I tried to suggest a little bit of both here. And I'm going to come in and make this, the gold parts of this probably stand out a little more. I'll add a little more yellow to them, and then when we get a white ink in a minute, I will add some highlights there too. So the other color that you use a ton is a really super primary color, and it's easy to remember. It's called lemon yellow. And that's what I'm doing to just, I don't know, I feel like the camera's not quite picking up the differences in colors here, but it looks pretty good. I wonder if it's a contrast issue. There we go. I think that's a little bit better. Kind of for the lighting on here, so you guys can see a little more like the yellow versus gold I'm trying to do here. And I'm going to come in with a little bit of a darker color, just a tiny bit, to add some depth here. But I don't want to go too red because we've got red up there, so I'm just sticking more with oranges here. And then we just got to do the last details to really make this pop, which means going to a pretty small brush. I use a lot of the either round brushes or what are called script liners, and I use a lot of 10 zeros for my details. What that means is that brushes go 0 and up in size, and then you can have fractions of a 0 size brush. So a 10 0 is 1/10 of a 0 size brush, I think, or something like that. It's very confusing. I think they numbered them before they realized they could eventually make smaller brushes. So then they kind of tacked that on afterwards. There we go, getting my white ink set here. So I think next I'm gonna work on, rotate this so the part that's wet down here I will not touch, though that's almost dry already. It dries pretty fast because I don't use that much water when I paint. And you do really get a feel for that with the paper and how much water to use to get the colors you want and get the paint to spread, but not totally drench your paper. When I've taught watercolor, people always use either way too much or way too little to start with. So what I'm working on now are just little details in white to make things pop. Our little dragon here. Add some scales maybe. That looks better. And since so much of this is supposed to be porcelain or some form of ceramic, you could very easily have a little bit of a shine to it. So just gonna punch up some of my edges here. Quite a bit more. I feel like when I've watched other artists paint, I either get inspired or intimidated, and I hope that I'm able to break down the steps and show enough details to inspire people more than to intimidate. I want to kind of get people past their fear of watercolor or drawing or painting. I thought I can probably, in the last 10 minutes or so of this piece, you can get all sorts of watercolor books on how to create textures in watercolor and how to paint different types of materials that you might encounter in a painting, like fabric or glass or porcelain like I'm doing now. And the more drawing and painting you do of those sorts of real world things, the more it helps you when you do a piece that has those sorts of things in it, even if it's a more fantastical piece like this one. And it's amazing how just adding little highlights, I'm going to blend this one in a bit, which I do by just getting just a little bit of water on the brush. Just adding these little highlights can make a huge difference. It really kind of gives a piece that three-dimensional quality. It's a great way to do dragon scales and things like that. So let's work on this little guy here. This is almost dry over here, but I'm still trying to rotate it so I don't rest my hand on drying paint. I'm just going to pop out his teeth and just some little details on his face. And sometimes I find the white ink is too thick and I have to thin it just a little with water. Depends very much on the brand of white ink. Some white inks are way too thin. That's why I say to go with kind of an acrylic base or one that's for, in this case, is for manga or comics, because it will be a really good, bright, thick white, and it's better to have to thin it down. You can also just take acrylic paint, white acrylic paint, and thin that down. There we go. I'm going to do a bit more on the creamer that he's sitting in here. Now, we're getting pretty close. I just have, I think, this and then the last two mugs to kind of finish up. So and often stuff will not look good till you get to these last details. That just makes a huge difference. And we scanned this when it was just ink. And I actually have a coloring page that I think is scheduled to post for $2 and higher subscribers on Patreon tomorrow. We posted a $1 and higher, so pretty much all paying subscribers, coloring page this morning of the strawberry kiwi dragon that we painted last week. So I try to do new coloring pages for all subscribers about every 10 days, and then the higher subscribers get a couple extra ones kind of in the middle. Sometimes they get some of the more detailed clockwork ones or just some extra things. Hey, you used my emote. It works. It's cool. I put custom emotes in, and I wasn't sure if they were going to work, but I guess they do. So at this stage, I just kind of keep working with some of the highlights and things until I'm happy with the lighting and the contrast and some of that. And if you've drawn or painted a lot of objects like china or things that have curved surfaces, it helps. When you first learn to shade, they'll usually have you work on your lighting with objects that are really simple, like eggs or apples, so you understand how light bounces and reflects and those sorts of things. There's a reason why drawing classes and books kind of pick those objects that seem a little boring. It's to teach you on some pretty basic shapes what light does. And if you're in doubt, you can try to find pictures of the exact material you're trying to paint, or you can try to set up a situation with lighting yourself and take photos. I have definitely done that on occasion. And for a lot of my creatures, I use a lot of real animals for reference. Lizards, cats. We have a bunch of cats, so they make great poses that you can use for any kind of creature. And I try to give them personality because if you have pets, you understand cats and dogs are not nearly as generic as a lot of cartoons or drawings or things would show them to be. I mean, some of them do a lot of personality. I'm a fan of Wallace and Gromit and the dog in Shaun the Sheep. Sean's my favorite. Sean and Timmy are my favorite characters in that series, where they use a lot of like the claymation. So I try to make sure that my dragons all have personality because I don't think they would be super generic looking. Sometimes I make them more cartoony than others. And sometimes I make them a little more realistic. A lot of that's about proportion, whether you exaggerate things or not. And I'm hoping I can finish this up in the next 4 or 5 minutes, and then I'm going to do hopefully a quick creature demo since we have a bunch of those to draw. And I have a specific kind of monster creature I want to work on. The nice thing is I have so many subscribers at the smaller painting level, I just get to experiment with a whole ton of little creatures every month and everybody gets something different. A lot of times I make sure they're dragons, but sometimes get griffins or just weird monsters. I'm doing a lot of weird monsters this month. I think that'll be fun. So now I'm working a bit on this fun little sort of candy cane-like teacup here. And I'm going to put a little bit of a flower pattern along the edge, which is really easy to do. You just draw little petals like this. Actually, it's kind of looking like a Christmas teacup or mug because it's kind of like snowflakes and candy canes, which I'm okay with because you could easily have a Christmas mug or teacup tucked into a cabinet. So we'll just say this is one of the holiday cups that this person owns and has put away, or maybe is sitting in the back of an antique store somewhere and they don't realize these tiny tea drakes have taken up residence. I love the idea of creatures that live in everyday objects, like teacups or shoes. I think our oldest cat is a little annoyed at me for shutting them out to do streaming, so I'm gonna go keep them company in a little bit and do stuff with them. But pretty much done except for adding some highlights just on this bottom cup here, which I'm going to bring quite a bit of white ink onto it because I feel like the gold on this is pretty shiny, and right now it's not standing out enough. That's a lot better. And I do feel like there's initially kind of an investment when you're painting, whether it's digital paint or you're getting set up to do watercolor, whether you're buying the tubes and the palette and things like the white ink that I have here. Not entirely happy with this mug, but I'm gonna tweak it a little bit more. I want it to kind of look like it has an intentional pattern on it. And then also like it has some highlights, so that's a little better. And I think it needs a little bit of a highlight over here. I'm watering my white down a little bit here so it'll blend in just a little and kind of make a lighter overlay on that. There we go. This is a cool way to do highlights. You can basically glaze the white ink over it if you just mix it with some water so that it will be much lighter like that. There we go. Whereas down here I'm using it quite a bit thicker because I really want some bright white highlights on these gold parts. Because you guys can hear the cat in the distance. She's actually in the other room and she's just unhappy. Or she's just wanting someone to play with her. That's her play with her voice that she does. She probably has a toy in there. Like the chat's very quiet, but I see that there's 3 or 4 people watching, so though I know one of them is Daniel. He's also playing Red Dead. There we go. You should remember too that you're in charge of whatever whimsical stuff you're painting, and if you want to put weird highlights and patterns onto things, or invent new plants or new china designs or monsters, you totally get to do that. As taught a while ago, the only rules are yours, but if you do something really strange in a drawing, painting, or creature design, or spaceship design, or whatever it is you're working on, just have a reason for it. If you can explain it, no matter how strange your reason sounds, you can usually get away with it. I feel like this might be somebody's holiday china collection because I feel like there's like a spring mug here and maybe a Christmas mug here, and this looks like it might be a fall or Halloween sort of a mug here. The cool little saucery plate under it. I'm just about done. And you have to make sure to really clean ink out of your brushes even more than watercolor. You really got to make sure to rinse them and get it out of the bases, because otherwise it can dry in your brushes and kind of destroy them. And I don't use brush cleaner. I used to when I was in school, but now I'm a little lazier and I just use water. And if a brush gets really gunked up, I use soap on it too. Okay, so I think let's use a little brown here. I need a little more of a shadow on our mug here. So I did not plan for this to be sort of different seasonal themed things, but it totally looks like that, so that would make sense. Because I actually have a shelf that has like a ghost mug, and part of the problem with those is they're not very practical to use day to day because a lot of them are not microwave or dishwasher safe. So they're cool for decorations, but then if you actually put drink and stuff in them, you have to be careful. It's the good temperature is not going to crack the mug and things like that. So just using a little bit of sepia brown paint, which is the same color or pretty close to it. Actually, this might not be sepia. This is burnt umber. It's going to be a little redder than um, my brown ink was, because that's, I think, sepia, and this is burnt umber, but it still looks good. I'm going to use a tiny bit of my Moonglow shadow color on this mug here, just to, I want to create kind of a shadow here where they're overlapping to make them work a little better. I think build a little more shadow there, a tiny bit up here. I think we're almost completely done. I'm going to zoom this all the way back out. So this ended up being a very happy painting, which is pretty cool. I'm okay with it being very happy. So the one thing when I was doing the brown ink yesterday I didn't do, and I don't know why I didn't do this, but I'd like it to match, so I'm going to do it now, is I didn't sign it. So I'm not going to bother to fill this thing with brown ink just for that. I will just get a little bit on my brush from the bottle. And I didn't want to sign it with a pen or with black because it's going to look weird since I inked it in brown. I'm just making sure it's going to be dark enough on here. Yeah, always remember to sign your pieces, and you have to decide how you want to sign them. I have two ways I sign mine. I either sign my J. Feinberg or just my JF, and then I put usually like the last part of the year, like a 19 or a 20 after it. And I have a different signature that I use for art and books and things than I do for legal documents. That is definitely recommended. So there is our full Tiny Tea Drakes party. And this is just gonna, I have to let the signature dry, but I'm just gonna move it out of the way. And we'll be done with our paints for now. And then the next thing I'll work on, so I was talking about how I do a bunch of these smaller size pieces every month. I sketched out and inked one already this morning. It's kind of a weird little critter. This is going to be a monster that loves grape flavored sodas and things, because I've been asked to put something grape in the book. And I want to do another creature. So I thought I would show kind of the design on something that's not as much of a dragon. This is going to be a new species of creature. So I've got my mechanical pencil, an eraser. I use kneaded erasers. I talk about these a lot in my streams. They are kind of a stretchy eraser that you can shape into anything you need. It is not very sticky. It's a little tiny bit sticky, and you can use it to lift pencil off to just make pencil lighter, or to completely erase it, and it's great on watercolor paper because it won't damage the paper. So the theme for this creature, I thought it would be neat. One of the beverages I don't really have represented in the Beverage Beast book is chai, which is sort of a form of tea, but people often refer it separately. And I wanted to kind of have a play on words and make something that's like a chai fly. So it's gonna be like a kind of a housefly inspired monster, but I want to have it be definitely more designed kind of creature, so just loosely inspired by. So I have this idea to kind of, hopefully you guys will be able to see this well enough, do something with flies have these sort of rounder heads, and do something with the really big eyes, but I'm going to kind of exaggerate things more. And then they have their sort of bodies, but this guy's going to be sitting, not in a way that flies actually do in real life, because I don't think they're capable of doing this. So, and I've done a lot of bees and other insects before, so this is a very similar sort of process. I'm just going to see if I can maybe zoom this up or adjust the camera a little so you guys can probably take the brightness down, the contrast up, see if that helps. Or maybe the contrast down. Okay, go the other way. So you guys can be sure to kind of see what I'm drawing, which is a little tricky because I do draw pretty light at this stage. I'm just putting shapes down. And the reason I've kind of drawn him with some space behind him is I want to have fly-like wings, but they're just going to be sort of like he's chilling. So his wings are just going to go down behind him. And I just do very kind of basic shapes to start with. Okay, so I'm definitely going to do some more design on this, and we're going to kind of do some things that normal flies don't have. So he's going to have a bit more personality in the eye. We're going to put some patterning around the eye for sure. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. And then flies do kind of have little mandibles, so we're going to do something with that. Like this is definitely some sort of weirdo insect thing, but flies actually have hairs, and I thought it'd be cool to do this as kind of a fluffy creature. Trying to make sure we're not losing the I think the camera is kind of auto adjusting a little for the light, which makes it a little tricky. And once I start doing this in ink, you'll be able to see a lot more of what I'm doing. But I didn't make his eyes quite as big. I'll probably put some sort of thing around them because I really want to kind of have that idea of those sorts of shapes. And also just looking at some reference pictures of photos of actual flies. I'm just gonna do a quick change of what I'm looking at here. So yeah, I have a screen. My computer's right next to this, and I can kind of look a little more at their faces and kind of, I want to make sure that I get the antennas, or they're not really antennas, huh? Well, I kind of have them. Something coming off this here. I think that's pretty important. So I'm trying to see. I think I want to do kind of like a bit of almost a floofy mohawk on this creature. Remember, we're just loosely basing this. This is some sort of bizarre monster. So, but I do want it to have kind of the little antennas. But I think on flies, they're farther forward like this. They're more towards the front. And the only thing I'm not happy with is I feel like he, I don't really like his mandibles and stuff yet, so we're going to work on that. Sometimes it's hard to find photos to give you ideas of exactly what you want. Trying to find some more that show me like more of the face of a housefly, because that's very much the inspiration I want to use. And you also have to be very careful if you are using photos for inspiration that you are not kind of copying anything too much, because there's obviously everything on the internet is copyrighted, whether it says so or not. Always assume so, unless it says it's free clip art for use. And that's fine too, if it says it's for use as reference or as clip art, but you really have to be very aware of that. And I'm trying to find just like a picture that shows the face from the side, because I keep finding like above photos, and I really want to find one that shows a little more of something in here. I don't want it to look too much like an ant. And I think it's looking more like an ant because of the way I did the eyes. I think I need the eye kind of more in. There we go. That shape. And I'll just put some highlights in, but I'm not going to put an actual iris in. Since flies, they tend to have these sort of... Watch me change everything a bunch. They tend to have these sort of just big, well, bugs don't really have the same sort of pupils and stuff we do, so I'll just show a little bit of shading in here so we can start to figure out what this is going to look like. And sometimes it can take a while to kind of develop the exact personality you want. I'm moving the antennas a bit further up. Sometimes I try to do insect creatures, but I want them to not look too terrifying, because too many people are afraid of insects. I really want to do something that is a bit cuter. This thing looks kind of like a frog now too, but I kind of like that. So since I'm not locked into anything, since I'm designing my own creature, but I do want to make sure I have like the fly mandibles here. So, but I think they're going to come kind of like underneath here, almost like they do on, if you've seen the Predators, movie Predator, they use kind of a mandible on those that's very much inspired by insects. Okay. So he's starting to look like some weird kind of creature, which I like. And I'm not going to give him nostrils. I'm just going to do some really weird patterning there. But I do want him to have a mouth. It's a little different than maybe a fly mouth would be. I have a sort of plan for this, as weird as that sounds. And it's super fun to kind of use something like a fly as a starting off point, and then go nuts and design something incredibly weird, which is what we're doing now. So I'm going to do kind of segmented limbs here. And I'm pretty good at doing sort of insect looking limbs with segments, because I've done a lot of these. I've done scorpions and all kinds of bugs, so that helps. I have a sort of a plan. I'm just not super happy with kind of this part of it yet. Here, how these two parts are joining together. So I'm kind of working a little more on the shapes there. And I love to put in all kinds of weird textures, and normally on a fly you wouldn't see eyelids, but I think we'll give this guy some because it'll make him a little more interesting. He's such a weird creature we're designing. And one of these sessions, I want to do something where we kind of do a more planned event, and you guys actually get to, so we get a lot of people, hopefully. Kind of trying to build my Twitch followers a little more first, and Then we get to design a creature together where we'll just do some bizarre hybrid. Okay, so the reason I'm drawing this all weird with his little hand here is that I really want to have him trying to decide which side the handle should be on. Because his little flat hands are going to be holding a mug. So this is a pretty big creature if this is a human-sized cup. And sometimes I just come up with ideas like this because I really want to play with just like names of things. Trying to get my lighting a little better here. There we go. I like the idea of a Teafly. I think that's cool, and it's obviously some sort of pretty large monster. I know the lighting here is being rather annoying. Let's see if I reset it, if it'll be better. That's a little better. Pretty soon I'm gonna just throw some ink on this. It'll make it a little more apparent. I want to design these wings a little bit here. And I think this is going to be kind of the back of the fly, so that wing is going to be on the other side. And this weird mane-like floof. It's a very floofy creature. He's going to kind of go kind of down the back like that. This is a weird creature. But I wanted to show something other than a dragon because I've shown a lot of dragons on here, and in general with my work I show a lot. So show how fun it is to design something a little different. And do some cool looking wings here for this guy. I want to make sure it's not too close to the edge of the paper in my design. There we go. This might be one of the strangest creatures I've designed in a while, but it's pretty fun. So this is going to be the body of our segmented insect here, and then flies have a lot of legs, so I do kind of want to show some weird way it would kind of be holding things, that we would have some more segments down here. This critter is weird, but that's okay. And we're going to continue our foofy stuff down there. I believe flies have, I want to say it's 6 legs, but I'm going to check some more photos here to get this right. Not that I have to be accurate, but I think it's cool if we give him a lot of legs. Yeah, I think it's 6. Of course, there's all different sorts of flies too, but I was kind of basing this, so I'm trying to find photos of them on their backs. I'm kind of basing this on a housefly. All insects have 6. Daniel's letting me know that. That's true, they do. But then again, you can do whatever you want when you're designing things. And I'm sure there'll be some people who think this guy is creepy, even though I tried to make it cute, because some folks really don't like insects, which is sad. I definitely can understand, because they're kind of strange, but I think you can kind of get over that a bit and do a lot. So I think we're just going to show the legs on this side, because if I try to put these other ones here, it's going to get too busy. But I might suggest them. I guess we can see. This is definitely very, very, very loosely based on a fly. I wonder if he should be holding this with two hands. If that's what you would call a hand. So I'll probably just put these in really lightly in the back when I go to ink. But okay, so there is our super weird concept. I'm actually going to make it more exaggerated in the torso because we all know flies don't like sit this way either unless they're dead, which would be kind of bad. But I feel like I made his wings too pointy, so I'm gonna kind of round out a little bit. Her, I think this is a girl. It looks like a girl fly. I don't know why, it just does. And we're gonna put lots of things like little hairs on these legs and stuff. So this is about how much drawing I would need to do before doing ink. Yeah, I went from doing like cute teapot dragons to like this weirdness. And this is the part where it really gets fun. Because you get to just really experiment with what sort of personality you want to give the creature in ink. I tend to play a lot with my line weights and stuff like that, so it's going to be a fun guy. I guess I could have just gone right to watercolor, but I really feel like this guy kind of needed to be in ink. I'm going to have to decide if we're going to go, when I add watercolor, more traditional colors. Meaning maybe red eyes or black eyes, or if I'm going to go crazy colors. We might go some weird colors on this. I mean, it is a giant fly monster that drinks chai tea, so that's a little weird right there. And I wanted to show kind of a weirder design and something kind of fun like this to show that you really can do almost anything in art. You don't have to be limited by what exists or even what is standard in fantasy or even the anatomy of the creature you're inspired by, so long as you know what you want to keep and what you don't. So, like, I know flies do not have mouths like this. In fact, most flies and mosquitoes and those other things have more like sucker-like mouths, but I'm just going to be weird because I can. If you ever get stuck for inspiration, the best thing to turn to is nature, to look at insects or birds or bizarre deep sea fish. There's so much stuff out there that is so weird. I mean, look at the platypus. That creature is weird. Or here in Arizona, we have javelina, which are pretty bizarre. So I think you can still make up your own creatures, but you can get so many ideas from things that already exist. We had a bunch of people watching now. This thing I pretty much just made up this morning, this guy, to do a little furry critter of some kind. I'm trying to really expand a lot of what's in my book. So yeah, we have dragons and we have dragon hybrids and we have fairies, but maybe we just have some really weird creatures too. So my Patreon subscribers may be getting just some really weird stuff in the mail next month, but it's still pretty cute and interesting. And I try to make sure if they're getting a monthly piece that it's a little bit different every month. I think I gave this fly monster like the cutest little chin. I don't know what happened there, but it's so cute. Good morning, Vamp Feline. Thank you so much for DJing last night. I really enjoyed that. And I kind of like that you didn't do it super late because I can't always stay up super late because I seem to wake up at the same time every day anyway. Part of it is the cats wake me up, and then part of it is I just wake up. So then I get sleepy at like 3 in the afternoon, 2 or 3. So sometimes staying up really late to listen to music is fun, or when we go out to somewhere to go dancing, but then I'm all super tired the next day, so I have to allow time to go take some naps and things. This is the most bizarre creature. So, for those of you who just joined in who were looking for the picture I was doing yesterday, we finished that up in the earlier part of the stream. I'll bring it back over to show you guys. This is how it turned out, which is a little more of my traditional creatures with dragons, and we did like a very whimsical fantasy piece. And then now we're doing some creature design since I need to do. Gosh, I think I'm now at 8 pictures this size every month, and everybody asks how I turn out books so fast. But if you assume that a lot of these creatures get at least one, usually 2 pages in a book, and a 100-page book has 50, 60 creatures, maybe 75. And I'm doing 7 or 8 this size, and then also some of the bigger ones every month. It turns out that they go pretty quick. And I remember when I did my first big field guide, and I made the mistake of making one of the stretch goals to make it longer. I realized I was gonna have to do all this extra art, and that we were doing a 200-page book, and that seemed so big. And how was I gonna get that done in a few months? And now I turn out art so much faster than that. I guess it's just habit forming. You get in the habit of doing it. So now that I've kind of got some of the face inked, I'll go ahead and erase some of our pencils so you guys can see it a little bit better. What our creature is coming out like. I don't know. I think I would totally have tea with this guy. He's pretty interesting looking. Or gal. I think it'd be cool if we give it stripy antennas. Just because. And, oh, thank you. The influencing, the painting from yesterday turned out beautiful. So much of that is like just the last like half hour you work on something. It's adding all of the details. And I know there's artists whose pencil drawings are really beautiful. And I guess I probably could do some more beautiful ones if I worked at it. But so much of the time on iSketch, it kind of looks like a mess. I think my sketchbook looks like a 5-year-old has been scribbling in it. But it eventually turns into ideas that look really cool. Just gonna swap pens. I think that one's, it's not dead, but it's not flowing as good, so it might be starting to run out. Sometimes if I leave them for a little bit, they refresh themselves. I wonder if these guys would be buddies. Though I feel like this creature is very small and this one's pretty big. This one's almost human sized. But I'm going for like a nice fly monster, not like the human fly horror movie version of it. I feel like I don't want to terrify people too much. And actually, if you look at really close pictures of some insects and spiders and things, spiders are pretty cute, some of them, when you see them up close. I know a lot of people are really scared of them. I don't know. I've never had an issue because actually I've never been bitten by a spider. I've been bitten by lots and lots of things that spiders eat. So I like spiders because they eat all of the bugs. I thought it'd be really fun to show what it's like designing something that is not a dragon. Though I've done dragonfly dragons, and I don't know if I've ever done a housefly dragon. You can see where you could take some of these elements and that would not be that difficult. So yeah, I want this to be segmented, but it's going to have weird little sort of spiky things coming off of it too. I think the first time I did a scorpion or like an ant or something as a basis for a creature, it took me a lot longer to figure out stuff. And now it's like I don't have to use reference for segmented legs. I've drawn lots of them. I'm trying to remember the name of a book to recommend if you want to learn to do all sorts of weird creatures. I believe it's called Fantasy Genesis. I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure that's it. And it actually comes with a chart. And it has dice on it, so you can roll for different weird creature parts or settings or things and then have to combine them. It's a great exercise if you're trying to be better at doing concepts. So you might get like a plant that is also part dog or something like that. But then the book itself has how to draw tons of different sorts of parts. It has a whole section on like alligator jaws and stuff like that, or on monster plants, things like that, so that you can kind of combine them in different ways. And I'm pretty sure it's called Fantasy Genesis. I'm trying to remember. I have my copy around somewhere, but I collect a lot of how-to books with fun things like that. But that's it fun. We used to do artist parties where we would bring that and roll dice, and then you had to draw whatever you got, which was interesting. And we also used to do something like that where we would draw things from papers in kind of like a hat or a jar that my teacher would do in character design class the first couple weeks. Um, and I guess that teacher would do different themes every class, and I just happened to get the Roald Dahl BFG character design class. That's what we were doing, which I was really, really happy about. See, this is like a gentle fly monster. It's got floofy fur on the back. It's probably very cuddly. I know there's going to be at least one person who tells me this is terrifying and why would I put this in the book though? Because I did an absolutely adorable fluffy baby spider dragon in one of my books, and I was told it gave people nightmares. So, and one of my coloring books, I don't think it's actually ever appeared in any of my books, and I should really put it in there. There is a spider cat, um, which either terrifies people or they want one. I was like, man, cats are enough of a handful. Can you imagine if they could like climb up on your ceiling and drop on you from up there? Talk about like an entirely another dimension they could pester you in. So I've talked about this a lot with how I ink. I just use Sharpie pens. I buy boxes of them because obviously I ink as many as 20 drawings a month. It's usually like 10 or so, and then some are just painted without ink. But I try to do like some of the really weird ones in ink so I can get a coloring book picture too, because who would not want to color this adorable creature? And sometimes I do really simple ink, and sometimes I do kind of more textures like I'm doing on this one, a little more shading. I feel like this would be a very civilized, charming creature to have afternoon tea with. But I'm still going to call it a chai fly because I like the fact that those words go together. And so much of what I do is just playing with shapes because I've done a lot of creatures you could put scales on. Cats can't do that already. My cats can definitely do some gravity defying stuff, but I don't think they can walk on the ceiling. I think there's a still a boundary there that has not been crossed. But Spider Cat could do it. I gave it really cute like spider legs too in the head of a cat, but then it had extra eyes. I think it's in oh gosh, the second coloring book I did, maybe the third one. Um, and people either liked it or were like, "Why would you put that in there?" I feel that's the reaction of a lot of my creatures, which is great. I think they're both great reactions, which is it's either terrifying or I want one. Except I have a few friends, my friend Samantha, who usually will think if it's terrifying, she wants one because it's terrifying, because she thinks anything terrifying is amazing and cute and fun. And there's a lot of resources out there for learning different creature design and things. And I always tell people just find different animals and try to put them together, try to see how they would fit. I definitely got way better at design last year um, because I was doing the book I did called Dragon Plus that was all creatures mixed with other creatures. And we did dragon unicorns, and I did assorted some really weird ones. The flamingo unicorn was the biggest challenge. I actually put that on the list on Patreon as a joke, and then everyone voted for me to paint it, so I had to figure it out. I should know better than to do that. But it definitely broadened my skills a bit. Yeah, I tend to be somewhat scribbly with my inking because you can't always thicken lines. Some things I'm more careful about. This one I kind of want to have a little more of a scribbly look and some texture to it. I like these sort of weird things on its back. I don't know what they are, but I think they're kind of cool. I think it's pretty cute. I would hang out with one. I think they're very intelligent. Maybe they were developed by some crazy experiment by a wizard gone wrong in the Victorian era that just created these giant, very refined tea drinking fly creatures. I think they would talk with very kind of refined language and probably a British accent because that would be awesome. Sometimes I'm sad that I don't do animation. It's an entirely different thing and it's so much work, but I would love to see just like one of these creatures come to life and movement and have a bit of a conversation or sip their tea. I can totally see them that way in my head. And oftentimes I don't know the exact design so much as that I want it to say be inspired by a housefly and then I want it to have a certain personality. I knew I wanted this to have like a very ladylike personality versus being kind of terrifying. I thought that would be fun. Just designing some crazy wings down here. It's getting there. And I do find it's easier to teach kids. I know I've said that before, but kids don't have as much of the limits as we have. I had to work a little to get past mine. But imagination is such a great thing. Why would you not go completely nuts and weird? That'd be awesome. I bet the male ones, this is like the female one, the male ones could wear like top hats too and have canes, but they'd have multiple like canes because they have all the extra limbs and they have a whole society somewhere that's hidden away that's still stuck in Victorian era England and their afternoon tea. Okay, I might have to just call this an afternoon tea fly. I think that's a pretty good name for it too. But it might just like tea in general. So I think if you get past the fear of designing something completely ridiculous and silly, then you can really just have fun and do so much. And if you want to see ridiculous and silly creatures that are really popular, look at any of the. I was gonna say any of the sci-fi series, though I feel like newer Star Trek stuff's probably not quite as silly, but Doctor Who has some crazy designs. Star Wars, whether you like the newer stuff or not, I've always liked the designs in Star Wars. In fact, the school I went to in Hollywood, some of the teachers and guest speakers there worked on designs for Star Wars movies. So it was really cool to learn things from them and learn kind of what the process is. We get to meet the guy who designed, he was a concept artist, but he actually designed prosthetics. So he was designing the pieces they were making for, I don't know which X-Men movie it was, but it was Beast. It was what was going to go on the face of the actor uh, in the X-Men movie, which was really cool because I'd never met someone who'd done that kind of design before. So it was totally different things you have to consider. They had to kind of use templates of the actor's face and design over those because they had to fit that specific actor, which was pretty cool. And then I think they were going to do like more. I don't think if he did the clay sculpting or other people did to actually sculpt the prosthetics, but there was like a whole visual design process that happened in the concept stages in the movie. Gotta have steam coming off of our teacup there. Yeah, I think it'd be awesome if they had just like a very refined sort of culture, these guys. I always joke that you gotta know the rules to break them. So if you've drawn real insects, that's where you can kind of just do whatever you want for segmented limbs because you've done enough of them that you can get away with it. It won't matter. I think all the best creature designs in movies too are very much inspired by some form of thing that exists in our world. Because we have to relate to it, we need to relate the eyes or the mouth to something, the expressions it makes. So I think the best designs are at least inspired by some sort of real thing, but then taken in some bizarre direction. It's so cute. Kind of really like it. And I've done terrifying stuff and super cute stuff too. Both of them can get a little weird if you're working on them for too long because then you end up staring at something that's either terrifying or super cute. Sometimes the cute stuff can become terrifying. I kind of love that combination. You don't know if it's something you want to pet, take home, or it's going to eat you. And we just started watching The Mandalorian, which, if nothing else, I'm enjoying the ridiculous creature designs. I mean, Star Wars has always had some of the most ridiculous I know. The original Yoda was actually sculpted by Wendy Froud. She also sculpted the Gelflings in Dark Crystal in the original movie. And it was actually on the set of Dark Crystal that she met the artist who did all the designs, Brian Froud, who also did the designs for Labyrinth and stuff. And that was actually where they met. And then by the time they were doing Labyrinth, she was pregnant, and Brian did, I guess the story is he did some drawings that had a baby in them before their child was born that they was going to be the baby in the movie. And then, because it takes a while to like plan a whole movie and do all the concepts, and then when he was born, um, he actually turned out to their son Toby turned out to look kind of like his paintings, which was really weird. So they ended up casting him in the movie. So that's actually the baby in Labyrinth is the son of the artist who designed Yoda, which is pretty cool. And he grew up to make a lot of shorts and do a lot of things with Henson and with puppets himself. So that must have been a really cool thing to grow up into. You never put too many weird spots on your fly creatures. Okay, so one of the things if you're doing like legs that are closer versus legs in the distance is like these ones I'm not doing very solid lines. I'm just kind of suggesting the legs are there, and I'm going to leave them a lot lighter, and I'm going to bold out the ones that are closer. And then we have to do the back foof. And sometimes I will do a very accurate pencil drawing. And other times I will just kind of suggest there's going to be foofy fur there, and I will figure it out in ink as I'm going if I have a pretty good idea. Okay. Now we'll take our eraser and kind of clean this up. And I can I kind of get the head a little more finished than the rest of it, but it's there. I don't feel like these guys would wear clothes either because at least human clothes wouldn't really work on them because they have too many limbs, but I think they might be a little obsessed with like human accessories. So like hats and gloves, maybe. That'd be pretty funny. Stuff like that. Now I'm just going to bold just some of my lines here. I figure we'll wrap this guy up in the next 10 minutes and that'll be a full 2-hour stream. I'm trying to kind of rotate what times of day I do. I know some of you guys are around more in the morning. Well, the morning here in Arizona, which is different for people in other parts of the world. And some of you guys are around more at night. I was having a lot of lighting issues yesterday, though, so It's funny, I was checking to see if I should get a newer camera after 2 years, but this is still the one that they recommend for streaming art. That hasn't changed. Yeah, Daniel is saying in our chat. Yeah, we just started watching The Mandalorian. I got the Disney Plus trial for the week, and then I'll pay for a month or two. And I want to watch The Mandalorian, and we're watching the newer Ducktales, and I want to rewatch some of the older Ducktales and older X Men. And I know Daniel wants to watch Gargoyles, some of those things. I don't have a lot of interest in like newer Disney Pixar movies. I think they're well done and often well designed. It's just I don't know. I feel like there's this trend as a child of the '80s. Um, Movies were not as politically correct for a while, and then they started to become more and more and more politically correct. And I feel like a lot of stuff in them is either they're a little too careful in some of the Disney ones, or they both like well Disney and Marvel, all of it they have such a focus on merchandising. There isn't as much of an issue with some of the TV series or made for TV movies as it is for some of the, like if it's a big blockbuster movie, they tend to be a lot more concerned about making sure the right characters appear for the action figures and some of the toys they're going to sell. And I feel like, especially with things like Frozen, there was just too many comic relief characters for my personal taste. And I'm not going to say it's good or bad because everybody has their own taste. And I love a lot of the actors who do the voices in Frozen, but I just can't bring myself to watch Frozen 2. Especially because they were originally doing Frozen as something inspired by the Snow Queen, and they threw out like I think everything but the names and maybe the fact that it was going to have ice and snow. And the reindeer. There was a reindeer in the Snow Queen, but that's kind of it. And I thought that was kind of sad because it's actually one of my favorite fairy tales, and I would have loved to see them do something on the lines of more classic Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, something like that, but with the Snow Queen. And unfortunately, I'll never have that, which makes me sad. But there's a lot of cool versions. Oh, is there a 7-day free trial for the DC one? Ooh, is the Harlequin that how we can watch the Harlequin thing? We could just turn it on for 7 days. When we turn Disney off, we'll just turn that on. A lot of people do like the year-long subscriptions, but I find there's some services like Hulu that have new stuff I want to watch every week. And then I have Amazon Prime because just for the fact that I'm running a business and shipping, I pretty much have to have it to get supplies and things, and it's worth it. It saves us that much, honestly. But with services like Disney Plus or Acorn or BritBox, they'll add like 3 series I want to watch. I'll watch them and then I'll just turn them back off until they add something else. Oh, cool. Van Phelan saying the Harlequin animated show is hilarious because we really wanted to see that. Yeah, Daniel saw some of the clips for it, and we really wanted to see that because we're big fans of the '90s Batman animated series. That was my Batman, and then my Catwoman was the purple-suited Catwoman from the comics in the '90s. She and that era of Wonder Woman were kind of my role models. And then you're binging because it has 2 seasons, yeah. Well, even if you do a free trial and then pay for 1 month, you can usually. That's what we're kind of planning to do at Disney. So I kind of have a budget of like between $5 and $10 that we can use for a streaming service, and I just kind of rotate it. Because right now we're waiting. I kind of caught up. A lot of the shows that Acorn is getting, they look good, but they look really depressing. Like when you describe a mystery series um, as being like Broadchurch, it makes me not want to watch it because Broadchurch is so good. And I got through season 1 and I got through like 3 episodes of season 2, and I was just like, I can't do this. This is so depressing. Like it's really well acted, but it's so depressing. And I kind of need more of a balance. I like shows like Vera that are a little more serious, but I don't know. There's something a little bit comical or humorous in the way the characters are handling the serious stuff, which is a little more like real life. So Acorn just added like a whole bunch of stuff, and I tried to watch some of it, and I was like, no, it's all really, really heavy. Um, and I just don't want heavy mysteries or murders or things right now. So um, I turned them off, and I'm waiting for them in BritBox. Somebody's got to get the next season of Death in Paradise, which is one of my favorite shows. If you've never seen it, the mysteries are really stupid. They are about the equivalent of old Murder She Wrote mysteries, except that it takes place on a beautiful tropical island, which they actually do film it on a beautiful tropical island. And I mean, they're really ridiculous. One of the first episodes Daniel watched with me, there was this guy who everyone thought he committed suicide, but the detective decided he hadn't because he was holding a peanut in his hand. And ever since then, whenever we're watching something and there's like a weird, stupid little clue, but somehow the detective knows that something is up because of that, Daniel's like, "That's the peanut," which I think is great. It's kind of the mysteries are there's no way anyone could figure them out the way the detective does. And in Death in Paradise, they've gone through three different actors for the lead detective. They actually changed them. It's not one guy playing the same character. Um, and this is going to be our last season coming up with the current one, who is a cool Irish actor. And then they're going to do, I guess, another new detective. But I've liked all of them. So my video is glitching a bit. That's weird. Huh. I have no idea why it's doing that. Yeah, it is kind of looking weirdly blinky. Is it still doing it? See if it's better now. This guy's almost done. Because I see it flake a little bit. I don't know why, if it's just dropping frames when it does that. Hopefully it's okay now. I just figured I would kind of finish this guy up. And usually I use like a Boulder Sharpie. Usually I use a Boulder Sharpie or permanent marker to do kind of the outside lines to make them a little more coloring booky, but I kind of want to stick with a little bit of a thinner line on here. And if I decide, if I do a coloring page, that there's too much shadow and stuff, I'll just digitally, I have a good way that filters a lot of that out or erases it. I feel like this is the most refined afternoon Teafly you will ever meet. I can't do good British accents, or I would do a voice for this character, but wanted to do something based on a fly too, because they already have big eyes, so it was going to be a fun picture. That's weird. I have no idea why it's glitching, but we're almost done, so I don't know, because Daniel's not gaming right now. He went into the other room, so I don't think there's anything. Hopefully our computers aren't doing something stupid like eating up our bandwidth with something else. So I don't know why the camera would be glitchy and the audio would not be, because the audio comes from the camera, so that's weird. Anyway, almost done. Just want to make sure that the legs kind of in the front here are a little bolder. We have a whole bunch of people watching. Oh, good, it's fine now. There's probably a randomness on the internet. From all my time working in tech, I have determined that many technical issues are not logical, and that sometimes the simplest thing to do is to just try something a second time, because something gets cached weird, or I don't know. Between Windows, Mac, and the internet, they love to do all kinds of strange things, but or it can be bandwidth issues. I had a friend who was streaming twice yesterday, and the first time I watched, the bandwidth was really meh, and the second time it was fine, and I have no idea why, because she was using the same camera on the same connection, and I don't know. We have a pretty new, pretty good modem, and a pretty good, well, I guess it's a router, not a modem. We don't say modem anymore. It's all combined in. But I have a pretty good high-speed connection because I do so much work, not just streaming, but things where I have to upload ginormous documents to printers for books, stuff like that. But see, she's so cute. I would totally put this in a coloring book. I think this would be fun. And I know I mentioned this over one of the anime series we watched recently about little people in the forest, had a really cute um, beetle insect in it that moves in upstairs and it to the top of their tree, and it has sort of a very, very girly voice. I mean, we were watching it with subtitles, but it's a very girly voice, and then it has a little pink bow on one of its antennas, which I kind of love. I love that it was like this girly insect because there's such a stereotype for girls to be afraid of bugs and spiders and snakes and everything. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that's a gender stereotype that's kind of going away, which I'm happy about. All right, we're right about at 2 hours, and this charming insect's about done. What I'm going to do is scan this on the one that I did earlier this morning, which are both really cute. This one's a little less detailed. I try to do a variety so that when I do coloring books, you can kind of choose what you would most like to color in that day at that time. So this one's got a lot more kind of texture and stuff going on. So the important thing, I don't think I did it on either of these. I don't know if I missed it on this guy too. I usually, and since for coloring book ones and some of these smaller pieces, I just do my smaller signature with my initials because I think it takes up less space and looks nicer if you're going to be coloring it. Make sure if there's any remaining pencil that gets cleaned up, and then I'm going to scan both of these, and I will do future streams where I paint them. I don't think this guy's going to have like neon colors. I think she's going to be a little more traditional, but she might have like a weird colored eye, like green and purple eyes or something. I like the idea of an afternoon Teafly. So, let's see if I can get her to show up here completely. We did that today. We finished up this painting, which was the first hour of my stream, was adding all the details. We had all these swirls, all the highlights. I ended up feeling like the cups were different holidays, like there was a Halloween and a Christmas and like maybe like a spring Easter sort of tea set there. But we finished up this and we did this entire drawing. So that's a lot for 2 hours. And I think that's probably where I'm going to end the stream. I see we've got 8 people watching, which is more than I usually get. I think if I ever want to get any more goals in Twitch, we have to get something like an average of 75 people, which seems pretty far off. But now I get an average of between 8 and 10 sometimes, which is better than getting an average of 3 people watching. So I think that's pretty cool. If you guys have any questions, I think pretty much only Vamp Feline and my boyfriend have been in the chat this morning. Everyone's really quiet, but hoping this means more people are kind of finding it from my website because I show it on there, or just from Twitch in general. And if you don't follow me on Twitch and you want to know about future videos when I'm streaming, it's a good idea to follow me just so you'll get notified. Most stuff I'll just kind of pop on in either a morning or late afternoon. Just gonna bold a few more things here. But then I do plan to do at least one sort of formal scheduled event every month. And for that, we're going to have the $2 and higher Patreon subscribers vote on exactly what the theme for that more fancy event will be. So I'm kind of excited to do that a little later this month. But I think that's probably about it. I think this guy looks pretty good. Just adding a little more to a few places here. If you're not sure if something is standing out or is shaded enough for those sorts of things, one of the tricks is to step a little bit back and kind of squint your eyes and see what pops out and what doesn't, and where you might need to do some bolder outlines or things like that. And I love to vary my line thickness. There are a lot of coloring books where it's just one single thickness of line, which is one style, but I like to have thicker and thinner lines and sometimes do something shaded. This has got a lot of shading, and this one really only has a little bit under the chin here, so they're pretty different. I think they're both kind of cute. They're totally different. This thing is going to be purple because I'm going to just go with the cliche because it loves grape flavored things. It's going to be some sort of weird purple-ish creature, and I haven't decided if it's going to be purple and orange or purple and green. And then I'm not sure. I think we'll go some of the standard fly colors on here, but maybe put some greens and blues and purples into kind of sometimes flies can look sort of rainbowish if you see them in like the rain or the red light. So I kind of want to make it a little more of a pretty piece and not just kind of gray colors. So I'm thinking we'll do kind of gray blue shading, but have it have like rainbow accents because I think that'd be cool looking. Something like that. So I'll probably tackle at least one of these paintings tomorrow on stream for anybody who wants to tune in. And if you guys have requests for what time of day you'd like me to stream, please let me know. Um, the other morning I streamed, we had almost nobody in here, and then this morning we've got like 8 or 9 people, so that's really cool. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope I've helped entertain you on another day when we're all probably stuck at home or at least semi stuck at home, depending on jobs and stuff like that. I wonder if these guys have names. They probably have names in some sort of bizarre clicky language we can't understand. And there actually are really weird humanoid fly creatures that are like people with giant fly heads in one of my favorite Doctor Who episodes that I really liked those guys. I'm trying to remember. It's the one where they accidentally wreck a double decker bus in another dimension and get stuck in a giant desert with man eating metallic stingrays and giant fly people. So they definitely draw inspiration from all over for that show as well. But thank you guys for hanging out, and I will try to be back tomorrow or the next day, or I try to come in like every day or two and just get some of these smaller pieces done. Oh, thank you so much, Vamp Feline. Thank you for hanging out with me and for all your streams with your awesome music and your kitties and your puppies. I always love seeing those too. I feel like it's weird that like I get to talk to everybody, but we never. Sir Beasley. Well, this is the girl one, so this would probably be Madam Beasley, and then Sir Beasley would have the top hat, I think, because that would be fun. Okay, I'm gonna sign off, and thank you guys so much for tuning in.